Hey everyone, this is Laurie Meyer from stampedgreetings.com. I wanted to show you how to make a very fun card with a new stamp set that is in the annual catalog. It is called Circle Sayings, and it has some really nice sentiments and also some very fun images that can be used in a circular pattern. Some of them you'll need to stamp twice, others are a complete circle for you. This is paired with a punch. The punch is 2 3/8 in diameter. It is a circle, and it works incredibly well with this set. And honestly, who can have enough circle punches? It's just a great bundle to have on hand. I am not going to use the punch when I make this card, but I am going to be using 2 of the stamps in the stamp set. And let me just put these kind of side by side, and you'll see that the 2 stamps that I used, obviously I used the Cupcake, which is here, and then the sentiment I chose was Happy Birthday, which is here. And I do love the script. I think that is just really fun and festive and just a little different. Let me jump in. I'm going to show you how this card was made. And first thing we're going to do is look at the layers that are in the card. The first layer is the card base. And this is in the new in color. This is boho blue. I love this color. It reminds me so much of Wedgwood, which is one of my favorite kinds of, I guess you'd call it a china or a pattern. I really like Wedgwood. And the way I created the base is I took a piece that was 8.5 by 11, which is a standard size for cardstock. And the first thing I did is on the 11-inch side, if you think of this as twice the width, I cut the 11-inch in half at 5.5. That left me with a piece that is 8.5 in width and 5.5 in height. And then if you score or make an indentation at the 4.25 inch mark, that is halfway for the 8.5, that's going to give you a card base. That's a standard size A2 card base. If I look at the final card, there are a couple of additional pieces that I use to layer the card. I like layers. I think they just add something a little bit special, and they're not very hard to do. So what I chose is a layer of, this is the new Lemon Lolly. This is a brand new color, and you'll find that in the annual catalog. I'll put some links to the numbers that you'll need if you would like to order. And this piece measures 4 1/8 inch by 5 3/8. It's just 1/8 of an inch less in height and in width than that A2 card base, and that's going to allow the card base to show just a little bit on the edges all the way around, but it will still give a really nice border to the card. Now, one thing, and you probably already know this, is if you have layers like the Lemon Lolly that I'm going to be using, and that layer is really not going to show a whole heck of a lot in the card. I mean, let's face it, you're going to see 1/8 of an inch when we get done all the way around. There's an awful lot of that piece of cardstock that is not going to be used unless you're smart in the way that you use it. Notice that the sentiment is die cut from the same color. Well, what you can do is you can actually die cut this piece from the center of this piece. And then when you put the card together, no one will know that there will be a hole in this piece. It's just a great way to save paper. So let me show you what I did. I've got another one kind of set up already. This is the same Lemon Lolly, and it's the same measurement. So all I'm doing is bringing in another piece that I've already prepared. And I've die cut the sentiment that I'm going to put on the card. And the sentiment is from the die set, from the stamp set that I already showed you. But let me show you where the die came from. This is from a very, very fun set of dies. It's called Something Fancy. And there are some really nice dies that come in this set. Some concentric shapes and some other really fun little shapes that you can use to cut holes in your paper. I use the second largest, actually the smallest really, of the two that are sort of shaped like rectangles and then have the scalloped edge. That's the die that I use to cut out my sentiment. And what I did before I cut that out is I stamped the stamp set, and I used one of the new colors. This is a brand new color. It is Pecan Pie, and it is just a gorgeous kind of brown with a little bit of a, I think it has a little bit of an orange in it. It's just very bright, and it's a really, really pretty brown. I decided that the first thing I was going to do was get the markers for all of the 11 colors that are either coming back or that are new. And it's just a really good way, in my opinion, to be able to kind of test drive the colors to see which ones I want to get in terms of ink pads. So I put my stamp on a block, and then I used the brush end of the marker, and I literally just kind of colored over my stamp and then stamped that in the middle of the lemon lolly and put my die on top of the lemon lolly and die cut out my sentiment. So now when I put the card together, and I have my card base, let's go ahead and do that. I have my card base, and I can now put this piece directly on top of the card base. And just going to add a little bit of Tombow to this. Tombow is definitely my favorite glue for card making because it allows me to move the paper and get it in place where I want it to be before really committing to having it adhered. And obviously you don't want to put any glue close to where you've die cut because you may get some glue on your card base, and that's not necessarily what we're going for. So I'm just going to center that up, and I do have the ability to move that around just a little bit if I want to. And then I always like to turn the card over and give it a little bit of a burnish with my fingers just to get it really nice and set. We have one more layer for the card before we really get into making the front focal point. And that is a piece of the new in color 6x6 designer series paper. This features each of the 5 new in colors, all of which are wonderful. And there are 4 different patterns that you get in the paper. I chose to use, as you can see, a boho blue in the background. I could very easily have chosen to use a different color, but I really liked the blue and especially the lemon lolly and how they work together. So to create this next layer, and you're going to see that when I put it on, it again is going to have a nice little border showing from that lemon lolly. So we're building the layers, kind of concentric layers. This layer is 4 by 5 1/4. So this piece is 4 by 5 1/4, which means that when you cut your initial 6 by 6 piece, you are going to end up with extra when you cut your designer series paper. So again, if you kind of imagine with me, this would be 6 by 6. Yes, there is a little piece that is missing from down here. But the first thing I did is I put my 6 by 6 piece in my paper trimmer. I took 2 inches off, so that leaves me a piece that's 2 by 6. And then to get this to 5 1/4, I cut 3/4 of an inch off the bottom. So this is going to be my third layer. But we're also going to do something with that other piece that we cut off from the designer series paper. And this is where we're going to get into making the cupcake wrappers, cupcake holders, whatever it is that you would like to call them. And what's nice about this is if you actually cut your 2x6 piece in half, you will get two pieces that are 1 inch wide and 6 inches long. And that is going to give you more than enough room to stamp the images that you're going to use for your cupcake holders. So what you're going to see here is I've got one piece on the left, one piece on the right, and essentially this is the way that I stamped the images for the cupcake holders. I put my cupcake stamp onto my block. I got out my Memento black ink because I really want these images to stand up to the design that is on the designer series paper. And then on one side of the designer series paper, this is two-sided, so you've got, on this sheet anyway, dots on one side and diagonal stripes on the other. I put my Memento ink, and then all I did is I stamped enough of the image onto that designer series paper so I got the cupcake holder. For this part of the card, I don't care about the top of the cupcake. We're going to deal with that later. And on this piece, again, this is 1 inch by 6 inches, I stamped two images on one side. And then on the other side, which is really on the back of this section of the paper, I stamped my third image. And what that's going to do, which I think is fun, is it gives two designs to the holders. The two on the ends have the diagonal stripe, the one in the middle has the dots. And I think your minds are probably going in a lot of directions because you're thinking about what kind of designer series paper you have that you would be able to use to stamp these cupcake holders. And there are an infinite number. The only thing I would advise you away from is I don't suggest any of the specialty papers that have the metallic kind of coloring and coating. The reason is that Memento ink is not necessarily going to stamp well on any areas that are metallic. So take my advice, or at least try it if you want, but I don't suggest using metallic. And then what you're going to do is you're going to grab your snips. If you do not have a pair of Stampin' Up! Snips, trust me, you will love adding them to your collection. They are absolutely awesome. And you are going to fussy cut these. The only part that is, I won't call it tricky, but will take a second to fussy cut is that little bend at the end of each edge where it looks like the holder is kind of going around the corner. And one thing, and I'm sure you know this, when you fussy cut, and let me just start on one of these, don't move your paper snips. Move your paper. So I'm going to pretty much hold my paper snips still, and when I get to the point where I need to make a cut that is not straight, I'm going to move my paper. That's going to give me more control going around the edges, and I'm holding those snips straight as I do this, and I'm moving my paper. So that's the biggest trick that I can give you when you do fussy cutting. If you're not a big fan of fussy cutting, I get it. I mean, I don't mind it. And these images are really pretty quick to cut out. Again, the only part that I would say took me just a minute is getting the corners, the ones that wrap around both of the edges. But you're going to want to go ahead and cut out each of those three, and you'll end up with 3 of your cupcake holders. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add our cupcakes. We want to get those designed. And in order to do that, we are going to get that stamp out one more time. So we're going to bring back the stamp that we used to do the cupcake holders on the designer series paper. We're going to bring back our memento ink. And this time we're going to grab a piece of just scrap basic white cardstock. And it doesn't need to be any particular size. Frankly, I'm not sure I could measure this, but I'm not sure exactly what size this is. But it was plenty for me to get 3 of the cupcakes on. And all I did, inked this up with a memento ink, and I went ahead and stamped those 3. When I was doing this paper, card, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to put in the background right behind the cupcakes. So I decided that I was going to go ahead and stamp the images of the full cupcake on white. And then I was in a little bit of a quandary as far as what colors I wanted to use for the actual cupcake. And I looked at the new markers that I have, the ones that are from the new or returning colors that are featured in the annual catalog. And these 3 just jumped out to me. They said they look like cupcakes. So I have Lemon Lolly. This is the new Bubble Bath, which is just fun and pink and cute. And then I brought back in the Pecan Pie. I wanted to make sure that there was a tie-in with the color of the sentiment and one of the cupcakes. And then what I did is I used the brush end of each of these markers, and I simply colored, I'm getting ahead of myself, I haven't cut these yet. I colored the tops of the cupcakes. And it was really easy, really quick, and obviously this lets you make the cupcakes whatever color you want. Now, there are other ways to do this. You could also take a piece of Lemon Lolly cardstock if you wanted to, and you could stamp the cupcake right on top of the Lemon Lolly. You're going to get, in that case, both the cupcake and the cupcake holder in yellow. That's great. You could do that. You could also, if you wanted to, stamp 3 of the full cupcake images on a piece of white that will go on the top of your card. But I was at the point when I was figuring out how I wanted to put this card together where, again, I really didn't know what colors I wanted. And to me, this gives you the most freedom. You can figure out what color you want to make your cupcakes. And then I pulled out my snips one more time, and I went ahead and I just fussy cut each of the cupcakes. And I did the entire cupcake, not just the top, because what I'm going to do is I am actually going to adhere the designer series paper cupcake holders on the bottom. And these are very easy to fussy cut. Most of the area is pretty clean in terms of the length that you need to cut. The only part is up at the tip, not a biggie. So pretty easy to fussy cut those. And then when you get those done, you're going to end up with your cupcakes. And you're going to end up with adding the 3 cupcake holders that you've already fussy cut. You don't need to put a lot of glue at all when you add your cupcake holders. I'm just putting a little bit in the middle of that cupcake holder. And then I am going to line up the design and just let it adhere. And it's kind of cool. It's a little hard to see on camera, but even having that piece that is on top gives it a little bit of dimension. And here I have my 3 cupcakes that are ready to go. So now let's look back at the sample card and figure out, what do we have left? We have really assembly left. We need to get our cupcakes on top of the white piece, and we're going to do that. And we need to attach our sentiment to our focal point and then kind of put it all together. So let's do that. I'm going to bring this out on a piece of the lemon lolly just so you can see it a little bit better. The white, it's a basic white piece that I'm going to put the cupcakes on. This measures 4 inches by 2. The reason I made it 4 inches wide is I want it to be the same width as the designer series paper. Now, one thing you might not see unless I really show it to you is I put some score lines in here. And I did that for 2 reasons. I thought it would look nice as far as just adding a little bit of decoration. But honestly, the biggest thing is it's going to give me a cheat, because I will be able to line up my cupcakes a little bit better if I have some lines, if I actually know where I'm going to be putting them. So I'm going to, that's kind of bright. Let's see if I turn that off. That might be a little bit better for a minute. I put this into my scoring board, and what I did is I laid it in the scoring board so that 2 inches is on the top, the 4 inches is coming down, and at the 2-inch mark I went in 1/8 of an inch, which is just one of the grooves, and I scored. I went to the second groove and scored, went to the third and scored. Turned it 180 degrees, did the same thing. And by adding those 3 score lines, I'm adding some really nice decoration, and I'm also adding a cheat. And let's look at that cheat. So now when I put my cupcakes in here, I can see the line. I can actually align them where I want them to go. Trying to get that light so it's not completely annoying. There we go. That's a little bit better. And what's also really cool about the scoring board is I can put one of my markers at the 2-inch line, and that's going to give me a little bit of a visual to try, don't go crazy on yourself, but to try to get that cupcake in the middle. And I'm looking more at the bottom than at the top, because that little point is not in the middle. So I'm really looking more at the bottom. And then I'm going to go ahead and adhere that to the back of my cupcake. And I'm just putting a very small bit of glue. I'm sort of using that 3rd line, and I'm just going to do my best to get that kind of in the middle. I can take a peek and see if it looks like it's in the middle. So sort of looking at that line going straight down, and that's not bad. And then while that is still not quite committed to be where it's going to end up, I can put my other 2 little cupcakes and just see if I've got about the same amount of room. I'll scooch this little dude over to the right just a tad. And then I'm going to add in my other 2. And just having that line, that scored line, is giving me enough of a cheat so that I can do my best to get these lined up. So scoring boards can be more than a tool to put score lines on something. They can also be a handy little tool to center, like we're doing here, to try and get things as lined up as we can, and to get things, if you have a project where you need to have things in the middle, vertically and horizontally, a scoring board can also be very handy to do that. And now all I'm doing is looking at the right and the left of that cupcake and trying to get about the same amount of white space. And then I've got it on that 3rd score line. So it's all looking fairly symmetrical, which is what I'm aiming for. I think this design would also be really cute with different colors on the cupcake holders, different designs of designer series paper. There are so many possibilities. And I am going to definitely get out some of my designer series paper and just play around and come up with some different combinations. And what's also nice about the paper for the cupcake holders is you don't need a lot. You don't even need an inch square, and you would be good. So there we have our main focal point. And again, that glue is not completely dry, so if I wanted to mess around with it and try and get it even more centered, I could, but perfection is a little overrated, so I think I'm going to say that's good enough. Now, to add the sentiment, nothing fancy. All I'm going to do is kind of figure out about where I want to put the sentiment. But do notice that on the sentiment piece, I did add some score lines, and I just brought my scoring board back in and kind of judged how far above the happy I wanted that first line to be. So I put my piece in the scoring board like this, and then judged where I wanted that first line to be, scored, went over 1/8 of an inch, scored, and scored it again. I wanted it to look a little bit like the piece that has the cupcakes. And then I'm just going to attach that. I don't need to be super precise on this, just going to put a little bit of Tombow on it. And then when I attach it, I don't want it to be flush to the right. I want to have a little bit of an area that isn't all the way over to the right. But I do want to try to get it kind of straight. So I'm going to look at it from different angles and just see if those lines look like they're kind of straight. And then I will let that dry, and by moving it around, I am definitely getting it out of whack here. That looks pretty good. And then we've only got a couple more little things to do, and this card will be done. So I'm just going to put that over to the side. I'm going to grab the card base, and I will go ahead and put the designer series paper down. Now you've got a choice. With this designer series paper, you could put the stripes on rather than the dots. It's all up to you, whatever you would like to do. Since I only have one cupcake with the dots, I'm going to use the dots. And this designer series paper, you will find, is incredibly versatile. The patterns are very nice, they're very subtle. The colors are amazing. I can't decide. I keep changing my mind on my favorite in color. Today it's boho blue. It has been the copper. I really like the copper clay. And I also like the wild wheat. Okay, I like all of them. Moody Mauve is great, and so is the Pebbled Path. Yep, you can see I'm in a quandary. So just put that on the top. Nice little burnish with my finger. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use some dimensionals. And just want to make sure that my cupcakes are holding okay. We're going to go ahead and put some dimensionals on this piece. Now, you may think that I'm going a little crazy with dimensionals. I have been told that I can get a little overboard with them, and I'm not going to deny that. When you've got a big piece like this, if you are using dimensionals, you definitely want to make sure that you put enough, and that when you have a piece this size, that you also make sure that you are putting dimensionals in the middle of your piece. You don't want it to sag. So one thing that I will do is before I make sure that I have all my pieces on, I'm going to put that down and just make sure that it doesn't sag, that there's no area that's going to just sag. I'm also going to finish off that front piece just a little bit before I'm done. And what I'm going to do with that is take some of the Simply Elegant trim. I love this. I have used it on many, many projects. And I'm also using the super technical tool of Scotch tape. And I'm just going to add a little bit of color and bling to that sentiment. So I'm going to take the piece and start it in the back. I'm going to just put a little bit of that trim on the back. And you can do this either before or after you put the dimensionals. I do it both ways because I do like to know where I'm going to have my dimensionals and then add the tape around to make sure that I'm not getting things in each other's way. And I'm just going to wrap that around maybe twice just to give it a little bit of its own kind of spotlight. And then I'll go ahead and take that down. And bring my snips in. And just take that off. And that's just going to add a little bit of a differentiation, a border between the cupcake piece and the happy birthday piece. And then go ahead and take off the backings for the dimensional. These will be found throughout your home. You will probably find them in your hair, on your clothes, on your pets, in your car, sometimes at the grocery store. It is amazing where they turn up because they will follow you everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And then you can figure out where you want this piece on your card, how high or how low, and you have a cheat because the white piece is the same width as the designer series paper. So I'm looking at the edge of that designer series paper on both sides, and that is where I put my piece so that it will be centered with that. I also used my bow maker and I made a little double bow with the Simply Elegant trim. And sometimes if you want that trim to just behave a little differently, just run it through your fingernails and it will cooperate a little bit better. And then I have these glue dots. This came from an old paper pumpkin kit. And I'm just going to add a couple of glue dots. These are definitely handy. Just going to put a couple of those right behind where my knot is. And oftentimes I try to leave the glue dot on the backing and just take off the little wax paper. Doesn't always work. And then I'm going to figure out where I want this. I'll try to get it kind of centered and just put that down. Give it a good push. And then I'll bring my little snips back in and trim off the twine. So cute. And then the last thing, we need bling, right? Of course we do. I'm going to grab my rhinestones. These are some of my absolute favorites. And they come in 3 different sizes, so you can have fun with different combinations of size. I'm going to put a large and a small right down here. And then to balance out the size and also where I have the rhinestones, I'll put one up underneath that just a little bit. And there you have it. A very fun birthday card. Cupcakes, paper piecing, and I hope that your mind is spinning as far as different combinations of colors, designer series paper, sentiments. This could be a super cute get well, anything. And I really hope you give it a try. I would love to see what you make. So have a fabulous rest of your day, and I really hope you've enjoyed this. And as you can see, I'm going to have pieces all over my craft room. So until next time, Inky hugs.